Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with it. How do we find the solution? Where does that nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? The intention of this podcast is to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst Sale. Today, I am excited to have Greg Head join me. He is the founder of Greg's List. He's a mentor, advisor, and someone I've had the great opportunity to have a couple of other conversations with. We finally recorded one of them. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst G.A.M.E Plan, our approach to goal setting and execution. You can head to catalystsale.com/game for more information. Hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let's go ahead and get to the discussion with Greg. Greg, it is awesome to see you. I know not everybody else gets a chance to see you, and we've had a number of phone conversations, so I've not had a chance to see you in, I think, up until now, but you have absolutely made an impact on me in a number of conversations that we've had directly and indirectly by a number of people that you've had an opportunity to influence. So I'm going to just start off by saying thank you, not only for joining me on the podcast episode, but also for all of the work that you've done. How are you doing?
Well, good morning, Mike. Good to see you as well. And happy that you're feeling a little impact out there. I'm happy to be helpful. That's a little hyperactive in the helpful category. So glad to see some of that's made it your way.
So let's talk a bit about Greg's List and go to where this started and now where it is. Because I first found out about you through Dan Tyre and HubSpot User Group and some of the Startup Phoenix activities that happen in the Valley. How did Greg's List start?
Well, Greg's List is a comprehensive and curated list of all the software companies in Phoenix and Dallas and 9 other cities outside Silicon Valley. And it's a free resource at gregslist.com for job seekers, investors, local tech execs, and tech leaders to find the local software companies in the area. So it started in Phoenix, where I've been living for 23 years. I started one software company and we grew to 100 million and helped another one there and other 2 companies to 100 million growth from crazy, silly startup in Phoenix. And 6 years ago now, I started helping my friends who are running software companies. That's what we do. We hang out with people and they say, I've got enough software product, but not enough customers, revenue, and growth. So we dive in at their whiteboard. And I started helping 20, 30, 50 and more CEOs. And they were all telling me the same thing. Phoenix isn't a software town. You can't do it here. There's no tech talent. There's no investors. And I don't know who started that rumor, but I didn't believe it. And I literally had made a list in my Evernote of all the software companies and founders I'd been helping. I'm a list guy. And literally the investors and job seekers at tech talent were following me around saying, where is everybody? I heard you're the guy and I was playing the connector dude, like I'm sure I helped you, but Mike, Greg, could you connect me to that guy over there? And so finally, this is 6 years ago now, I just published a list on my website. I called it Greg's List because people were asking for it like that. I had, I was keeping track. I was adding software companies every month. It started at 100 software companies on Greg's List Phoenix. Now there's 770 real active software companies in Phoenix on gregslist.com/Phoenix. And we have all the jobs, almost 1,000 jobs at all the 700 software companies there. So there's a lot more going on than people can see. And it's meant to be a free resource to connect the people who can help these crazy founders who are creating the next generation of software companies. So I've since moved to Dallas 3 years ago. My wife wanted to get back to her hometown and my kids are now grown up and I came to Dallas and they said the same thing. It's not a software town. You got to go to Austin. And I said, I bet you there's a bunch of software companies here. Found 250. Now there's 650 Dallas-based software companies on Greg's List Dallas. And there's a lot more going on than people can see. And so over 10,000 people a month use Greg's List to connect with software companies in their area. And it's pretty exciting to have helped so many people.
It is. And again, you have made an impact on me. You have helped me in a number of different ways. And I know that you've helped others. I was at a social hour event last week with Christine Rogers. And She brought together a group of people with Casey Graham. And that was the first time I had met Casey. And in that conversation with both Casey and Casey Cox and Christine, your name comes up. And it's like you continue to work around. And one of the reasons that this happens, I believe, is because of your interest and genuine interest and drive to connect people. And when you're known as someone who connects people, who can help people, other people want to be around you and they want to talk about what you're doing. When did you first start connecting people? Like, when did you first start to see that this is a gift that you have and a place where you can make an impact and you can start to shine a light for other people when they think there's a lot of darkness and say, well, the software doesn't exist there, or there aren't any software companies. I was selling in Phoenix, and I'm going on long, but I'll come back to this. But I was selling in the Phoenix market. And one of the things that they would talk about in the Phoenix market, at least back when I was enterprise sales in the Phoenix market for an ed tech company, is that none of the companies in Phoenix are based in Phoenix. So it'd be American Express or it'd be Intel. And you would have to go out to Folsom or Santa Clara to meet with Intel, or you'd have to go out. You'd have all of these large companies that had large offices out here.
Right.
And over time there's such a base of talent that's here in the Phoenix marketplace, but you get this bias of these things don't exist. And then all of a sudden, as you start peeling back layers, you realize they actually do exist. And it's a really powerful community that's just getting started. So where did you first realize that you had this gift of connection?
I did 30 years in the software business, like in the firefight before it was cool, since literally the late 80s. So I'm running around in execution mode, and I learned a lot and worked with a ton of people along the way. And what I like to do is help. So I could do anything. I don't want to play golf and hang out. I ski and things like that. Today is it's a holiday. It's a Monday holiday. I come to the office and I realize, where are all the cars? And it's another holiday. So this is what I do for fun, is connect with awesome people and help a lot. So that was always my favorite thing, is really helping people, not just with connections, but with a deeper insight. Because everybody starting businesses or starting careers or starting something, they're a little confused about what the game is. It's all hard. They're generally lonely. So I'm going to, give them a perspective and dig in and then show them something. And then when they say, yes, that's it, then I say, well, there's somebody who does exactly that. And I'm happy to help there as well. So this is me just playing. This is what I do for fun as a crazy entrepreneur extrovert who doesn't want to get back on the field anymore. I do a lot of investment advising and the rest. So I'm talking to 20, 25 founders a week. Some I advise, some I've invested in, some I'm just helping and reach out to me on LinkedIn and want to say, oh, let me run my startup by you. So the connecting is all that founders need when they're starting something. They're all smart. They're all capable. They all see a problem in the world, and it's all hard. All they need is help, an insight, somebody who can explain sales to them, somebody that can do sales for them, somebody that knows the legal mumbo jumbo, the whole thing. So I just think the problem of a crazy person with an idea can be a global world-changing company that changes the neighborhood if they get enough help. And the big guys have enough help. If you got 20 million in funding, you got enough VPs and people running around. So I'm just there to help the serious, crazy ones. And there's plenty of people who help them. So it's kind of fun to make an impact like that. Lastly, I'll just make an aside here, Mike. I'm not one to sit on a committee in a local ecosystem and say, let's put on an event and let's do all this thing. And I'm like, no, how about there's 100 people right there who are doing it. Let's go right for them and help them get to the next level, not die in between startup and scale. And I just literally started doing that myself. And I think I've made an impact in a whole bunch of ecosystems and with a lot of people doing that. So that's the fun for me. Connecting is part of the fun, and helping with a lot of insight is part of the fun.
What's a common mistake that people make when they say, hey, I like to connect people and I want to help? What's a common mistake that people make when thinking about connections?
Well, I hope there's a lot of people connecting people to other people, but my version of it is to dig in, learn about them, what they're doing, what stage they're at, and what problem they think they have, and what problem they actually have. So I'm actually going to go all that way to say, so it's this, right? And they say, yeah, nobody ever explained it to me that way before. And then I say, okay, there's people who help with exactly that. And they're very grateful. Like all the people that moved to Phoenix for all the years. I moved from Silicon Valley and I've been in automotive software sales and I'm looking for a job at a software company. I say, so tell me about, were you VC funded? What stage were you? Are you this kind of VP of sales? Are you that kind of VP of sales? And then I'd say, oh, there's 3 automotive companies and one of them is at your stage and they need, and then I connect them and they find a job, that kind of thing. So I just don't think people dig enough. They're like the networking thing, random people meeting random people, I think is kind of silly. So I think there are people out there that can help you with the acute problem you have today if somebody could do enough diagnosis and analysis and therapy to discover what that is. So that's part of the fun.
Yeah. There are a number of people who I trust. And one of my challenges, I tend to trust people, be very trusting of others. Yeah. And which is good up into the point.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mike.
Yeah. Up into the point that they do something that makes me not trust them. And then once they do that, then I start to look at it and say, okay, well, was it me first? And then I'll give another chance. If it happens again, then I feel comfortable cutting things off. But there are a group of people that I trust. One of them is Christine. So as soon as she said, hey, there's a group of people who are going to come together here, you should be there, then I should be there. And so as you're going through this, you're thinking about your community and your network of people and whatever business you're operating in, find those people you trust, be open with them, listen and engage. Don't just go chasing, what is it, BNI or some of these other groups that are out there where a lot of my experience there is a lot of those people they're there because they're selling to each other rather than really saying, okay, here's where that ecosystem comes together. And I think that is one of the really powerful things of what you've done with Greg's List and pulling software companies together.
Yeah.
So again, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a common thread and I'm crazy enough after all these years. It's hard for me to deal with normal people that have normal jobs and are doing normal things. And not everybody has to be the unicorn chasing, world changing software funded entrepreneur, but I deal with people who are doing seriously hard things and making change in the world. So that's in my definition, that's less than 10% of everybody who's trying to make something up and make it happen in the world. So for me, I'm making up Phoenix is a place that you can start a software company and grow seriously. And now people don't say you can't do it in Phoenix, by the way. And it wasn't, before COVID. So I helped change a little bit of that. And I do hang around with the crazy founders. So there's just a common denominator that's in there. And I do get a lot of groups together of founders talking to other founders. That's what ecosystem is people who've done it before or are doing it right now who help each other. Yeah, there's other resources out there, but Silicon Valley is basically a network of people in the game, right? Comparing notes with each other. So I just try to be a little bit of that glue.
Why do people struggle with asking help? Or I'll leave it at that. Why do people struggle with asking for help?
It's just normal human stuff. Like entrepreneurs they're not superhuman. They're, I would say, courageous despite being as human as everybody else. We are smart and we think we know something and we don't want to hear an alternative point of view and admit that we might not know something or that we need help, whatever. There's a lot of, I think it's the independent, stubborn streak of entrepreneurs that prohibits some of them from getting help. So my story is I think entrepreneurs are sometimes, and me, myself included, sometimes stubborn about the wrong things. We're stubborn about what the idea is or the how to do it, as opposed to I'm stubborn about that this needs to happen in the world, and I'm agnostic about how we get there. That's generally a better approach. And the ones I know a lot of entrepreneurs who, including myself and others who've done big things. And generally speaking, you got to be stubborn about there's a problem and we're going to create something big. We're going to change the world, which is a little ambitious, if you will, and then pretty agnostic about, how you're going to get there. You literally have to keep changing sports every 12 months as an entrepreneur if you're growing. If you're starting to grow 50, 100% a year, every 12 months, your company looks different. And whatever worked for you 18 months ago isn't going to work, 6 months from now. The things are going to change. So I'm stubborn about being a professional athlete, what sport I'm playing, I'm going to keep changing. And that's a little counterintuitive. It's a little backwards, I think. Most people are stubborn about, I'm right about this thing, and that I'm not really going to bet on something big.
And what you see when you work with those kind of founders is the problem that they'll run into on the sales side or the revenue generation side is that they're just not getting in front of the right people, or the people just don't understand the way that their product can help them. And what they tend to do, it's kind of like getting into a situation where you know a little bit of Spanish and you get dropped in the middle of Mexico City and you just start and you need an English word to communicate something that you're trying to communicate. So now you say that word slower and louder. And that's not the answer. The answer is not, I need to just slow things down and keep shouting. It's, I need to shift something. I need to do something different. I need to come up with a different medium. I need to, taking a piece of what I heard as you were going through this, I need to start asking questions and listening because things are a little bit different. The game might be changing. And it's fascinating to see that happen over and over again. We tend to focus more on the features and benefits of the solution that we're delivering rather than getting into the detail behind the problem that exists in the marketplace. And not the problem as we see it as founders or leaders of businesses, but the problem as the customer sees it, because they're the one who actually spends money on this stuff.
Right. Well, you can imagine an entrepreneur that has a few employees and has a little revenue and is up and running. And it's kind of panic mode. Like their brain, signal is pretty much the same as somebody in a war zone firefight, right? It's very survival oriented and everything. And they pretty much, their brain is focused on get the sale, as opposed to, gee, I wonder if there's a better approach that ought to, longer term. So there's a lot of survival mode in there as well. What I like about entrepreneurs all over the place, and, like a whole bunch of people reach out to me and say, what do you think of this? And I got this problem and, I'll show them something that's useful for them. If you are creating an ambition, a startup says, here's a crazy new idea and someday it'll be bigger, much bigger, a lot bigger, kind of bigger, but that is kind of transformational. It's not normal, right? This isn't incremental. Small business owners tend to be more stuck and stubborn about how to do things. It's the way we've always done it, like normal people kind of thing. I'm not crazy about everything I do. I'm incremental about a lot of things, but so I think there's something that's unique about startups that they're willing to transform themselves as founders versus a small business owner that's, trying to be the best dentist in North Scottsdale or something.
So there seems to be this thing that's happening out there where, people fall into different camps. It's, I need to go out and raise money in order to do the thing that I need to do. And then there are some who will say, no, I can actually generate money by doing the thing that I want to do based on the market. Right. And each of those create different levels of pressure and can impact different levels of speed. Can you talk a bit about what's happening in the market today relative to all of this money that's out there, not having a lot of places to put it? So now you start to force money into certain areas where maybe it doesn't belong. And what kind of impact does that potentially have on the person who wants to change the world and now sees money is available? How do you think about the difference between venture back versus growth?
Yeah, it's a really big question. And it's one I've been focusing on lately. If you see some of my conversation on LinkedIn, that's getting pretty popular. So software business has been around since the late 80s. I was fortunate to start the moment it was starting. And in the 90s, it wasn't cool. Any of the dot-coms. And every successive generation, the software business continues to get bigger. Funding continues to expand. And now here we are, 2022, post-COVID, COVID super juice for the tech industry and so much money, like double venture investment last year from the year before, kind of thing. So there's so much money that isn't making any money in interest, low interest economy that is coming into the software space. The software business is still expanding. Microsoft's expanded by 30% last year.
No kidding.
If you can believe it. After all these years, we're still booming. So it's kind of boom time in tech. And there's a lot of money coming in. And especially in the recurring revenue SaaS business, that's a great business model. Once the flywheel gets going, it's really exciting for investors. Normal businesses can get, if you have a whatever car wash or an ad agency or something like that, you want to sell it. If it's successful enough, you can get 10 times your profit, on a good day when you sell a business. You sell a recurring revenue software business that has $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million of recurring revenue, that's in pretty good shape. It's growing and, customers like it, et cetera. You're going to get 10 times revenues when you sell it. So there's a gold rush that's happening right now. And so you combine that with founders who jump into the field and say, there's a problem in the world. The answer is software. I'm going to make a software company. And they quickly get into, this is really hard. I mean, it's not supposed to be easy. It's just hard. It's not impossible. It's just hard. And, they see the funding that's easily there. And by the way, also, this is just another thing. If you look around and see all the funding announcements and you go to any software conference, all you hear about is the funding, right? Yeah. So it's the total survivor bias. 20% of software companies on Greg's list in 9 cities, so 5,450 of them, 20% of them have outside institutional VC funding. 80% of them have a little funding, angel funding, and a little pre-seed starter funding, no obligation funding. They're not committed to anything. 50% of software companies on Greg's list don't have any funding. And it's not just the ones who just started last week, right? So there's way more going on that is either lightly funded, just a little touch of funding from an outside source, or no outside funding, self-funding, started from a service business, started from their savings, started from customer funding and growing. Yep. There's way more going on, which I call, that's door number 2. I call them practical founders who aren't shooting the moon, trying to be a unicorn. There's way more going on with practical founders than anybody can see. Actually, I see it. 80%. I'm talking to all these people all day long. And I kid you not, half of the people I talk to say, I've got this business going. Now I need funding. Why do you need funding? Well, isn't that what you do? I mean, like literally the crowd is saying. So venture funding was adventure funding in the 50s, 60s, 70s, all that Intel stuff. And now it's the norm. And so it's really interesting how it's gone that way. So I back people up and say, what you don't need is funding. You need revenues and all that kind of thing. So the default for crazy founders, ambitious founders, is I need funding and, go get outside funding. Whereas in their heads, I think the default should be, I'm going to build something that's useful, that I could sell, that has proof. And then the default should be, self-funding or very light funding until you know what game you want to play. So the biggest problem I see, Mike, with all of this is founders saying, gosh, I need to go to this incubator. I go to this pitch contest. I go to this venture. I got to talk to investors and get a safe note and start the safe note, Series A, Series B, right? All that game. And I say, so you're trying to be a unicorn, billion-dollar company, hundreds of employees, VCs on your board, 10 years of your life, all in, no hobbies? What is that what you're doing? Oh, no, I'm not trying to do that. Then why are you talking about bigger funding? Because that's the only game they're trying to play. They're not trying to get this to $3 million and sell it for $25 million.
How many, just for numbers, because some people may be familiar with this, may not be familiar with it. So I'll ask the direct question. Of those companies who go the venture back route, and because they're going to become unicorns,
they're trying to be unicorns.
Or, sorry,
of what?
They're trying to be. What's the ballpark number on that actually become unicorns out of 100 venture-backed companies?
Well, out of 100, 50 don't make it. And they're just kind of pushed off in the corner. And the founders are screwed.
Yeah, so hear that.
No, this is normal.
Business,
this is
don't make
right. Nobody's arguing this. Right. So I put this out on LinkedIn. I'm telling people, by the way, this is the game. And no VC is going to argue. They're like, oh, yeah, that's true. It's not a sin of, they're not lying. They're just not, it's a sin of omission. They're not saying, oh, yeah, you'd probably be better off if you grew this to 3 million and sold it for 25 million on your own because we can't make money with that. They're just not saying that. Nobody's saying that. There's no business model behind that. The VC industrial complex is not advising people that there's a door number 2 called self-funding or very light funding. And of the 25 founders I know who I've worked with and helped, who sold their companies in the last year, and it's also a great time to sell a company for 7, 8, 10, 12 15 times revenues. Okay. About 25, 2 of them are VC funded. And they did the high five, won a pretty big prize kind of thing. 22 are like the ones that nobody knew about. And imagine growing a company for 20 years and it gets to just over 10 million and you sell it for 150 million, Mike, a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
And this is one everybody pat on the head and said, I'm sorry, you're not raising funding. You must not be good enough. Okay. There's like, or here's another one out here in Dallas. And they started a software company for construction software and app for the home builder trades that put in the windows and the plumbing. And, they actually do the work on them building a house, not the home builder.
Yep.
And they built something. They grew it to $1 million ARR and they sold it for over 10 million.
Wow.
In 4 years.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's a lot more. There's actually 50 times more of that than people going on that people could see out there. We only see the big funding that makes the news. Nobody in the tech press or your local newspaper or whatever is going to high five about that.
One of the questions I wonder about too, because we see them in the news, is who's paying to get those things in the news?
Well, I don't know. Nobody's really paying to get them in the news, like the TechCrunch high five about the funding. It's just big funding is built for that high five thing. And I know this. I've been inside VC funded companies. I did this game professionally, the professional sport for 25 years. I helped raise $150 million. Helped start a company that went public. I know the game. If you raise $20 million and it's this crazy thing and, it's in Phoenix, you raise $20 million, that is a clickable, newsworthy thing. You're going to get 100 times more clicks and opens and visits based on that than, hey, we just hired 3 new VPs and our churn rate went down from 2% to 1.8%. It's just not clickable kind of thing. But 20 million funding, it's credible. It's a simple number. It's kind of going from nothing to something. It's newsworthy. So that is just a bias that's in there. So we don't see the little ones. Somebody sells their company for 25 million after 5 years, which happens all the time. What people don't see is there's like 5 founders in Phoenix that have made more money themselves than the $150 million this guy did by growing a company self-funding for 20 years. There's like 5.
Yeah.
Right. It's like saying, I don't know. It's just kind of illogical. We just don't see it. It's like saying everybody needs to go to college. And if you don't go to one of these top 10 Ivy League schools, you're stupid.
Yep.
No, not everybody needs to go to college and not everybody needs to go to Ivy League schools. And, and in fact, plenty of massively successful people never even tried. So it's just really insane out there. So I have to kind of coach people off the drug addiction of funding, if you will.
Well, and so let's talk about the drug addiction of funding. So when you say drug addiction of funding, why is it an addiction? But what do you mean by addiction and why is it an addiction?
Well, for one, it's overcooked. Everybody's saying you need it. It's a little bit like an opioid crisis. It's overprescribed right now. And nobody's really admitting that there's a business model behind the whole VC industrial complex. It's the money that funds the incubators, that funds the seed funds. And right, they don't know, they're getting advice from investors. Should I raise money, Mr. Investor? Of course you should. It's like going to McDonald's and saying, should I eat more fast food? Yes, I think you should supersize it. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Who doesn't want to supersize it?
Yeah. So VCs aren't bad. They're all, I know hundreds of them. They follow me around. I invest. I play this game. It's just not for everybody. It's actually not for most founders. And the interests are not really as clear as people see. If you're selling money, you should know that they're selling money and take their advice accordingly. The second thing, Mike, is once you get a safe note, and I'm thinking about a $10 million pre-money valuation, that means your Series A has to be at a 2050, and which is happening these days. If you get a Series A at a $40 million pre-money valuation, you raise 10 million and you're worth 50, right? They want to get to a 10 times return, and your Series A turns into a Series B, another round of funding, and you get Series A, and the first conversation is about your next round of funding.
And it seems like the timeline is shortening between A and B.
Right. Yeah. The wins, this is another thing that founders don't see very clearly, that VCs see very clearly. I just read a book, The Power Law, about the story of VCs these days, and it's very clear. You get on a VC blog. If 50% of your investments that you were so smart and so savvy about it, 50% aren't going to make it. You got to make it big on the 1 out of 20 that, is going to go big. If you take the top, 50 deals out of the Zoom, Google, right? All that stuff. You take those out of play, it's VC investing is not very exciting. Everybody's trying to find the big unicorn, the super win. They're not trying to get base hits. They're not trying to get home runs. They're trying to get, consecutive grand slams, which is pretty rare. And if you're not one of those, you kind of get relegated off into the corner.
So how does all of that align with the founder's original vision focused on solving the problem that they wanted to solve in the market?
Well, some founders say there's a really big problem. This is going to be a really big market. It's going to be global and massive, and everybody's going to be doing it. And it's also going to be a race. So if I start it and other people are, and so those are the ones, that's the unicorn game. Okay. And that's how you play it, right? I'm not against VC funding. I'm just saying it's really for about 10% of software companies and founders on a good day. And it mostly doesn't work, but there's a chance, right? And it's really exciting. But for most founders, especially outside Silicon Valley that really that are super savvy and serious and smart and everything, it's a better game to grow a serious software company to 1, 3, 5, 10 million ARR and sell it for 10 times revenues, which is, life-changing and exciting and everything. By the way, there's also a case for I like creating, I love my team and building and software and this whole market and the whole thing. I love it so much, I'm not going to sell it. I'm just going to run it, right? It's pretty exciting. But so if you get funding, the moment you take serious outside funding, you're committing to sell your company for a lot more. The race is on. And most founders don't want to play that super steroid race. It's pretty crazy. This is why I'm having so much fun doing what I'm doing. I was in the rocket ship or whatever, that VC funded climb Everest category creation. Like Mike, I quit my job in Silicon Valley, helped start a company in Phoenix with Pat Sullivan, the founder of A.C.T.S, somebody I worked with before. And in 96, and we went from kitchen table signing in blood, we're going to go do this thing, to 100 million in revenues in public 4.5 years later. Okay. Yeah. Just like not many people know what it takes to play that game and, can hang on when it goes that fast and all that kind of stuff. So, horses for courses. Door number 1, if you want to call it that, VC funding and aggressive funding and unicorn and get as close as you can game. But there's a door number 2 for practical founders that has a whole bunch more options that give you way better odds of success, having a life and creating the results that you want. So a few things have happened in the last 3-5 years that I could see very visibly. Like in the 90s and the 2000s, you had to raise money to actually build software. Okay. Because you had 30 software developers to build a Windows app and client server and all that stuff. Every year, software gets cheaper and cheaper to make to get something that you can get into revenue. And every year, for the right kind of market, it gets easier to reach your customer, right? If you're not trying to boil the ocean and try to be for everybody on the planet, right? If you are for a certain kind of dermatologist, right? It's really easy to reach them. You don't have to drop flyers from the sky, all over the world. You just go call the 700 dermatologists that, are in your region and you get started. The last thing is that there is a hugely active market to buy software companies that get to 1, 3, 5 million. The starters get it up and running really hard. And then the growers, the scalers buy it and say, gosh, I'll pay 10 times revenues. I'll pay $30 million for that 3 million because I can grow that to 10 million, right? And it's way different than it was 5 years ago. Nobody was imagining you could sell a $3 million software company, revenue software company for $30 million. But to me, that's the fastest way to make $30 million. Life-changing wealth for you and your founders and your team is go create a savvy software business that can be awesome and get it to 3 million in revenues, which is really hard. I'm not saying it's way easier than VC funding or whatever. It's still really hard. But you get your prize and you can get out. And in 5 years, you can have your prize.
What you're describing is a different perspective on the game. And when I say different perspective,
it's an alternative to the game. And it's very popular right now, but you just can't see it.
And what's exciting to me about the conversation is, well, one, you just nailed the point about creating a high level of clarity and focus relative to the type of customers that you're serving, not I'm going to go out and boil the ocean. If you believe that everybody is going to use this thing, your message is just going to be so diluted and you're going to lose some stuff. So when you see that, what's a telling thing that you will usually hear from a founder? And the reason I'm asking the question is I think there are others who are listening to this who are saying, hey, that's what's going on in my head. What's a telling thing that they say where your view, you would immediately start to dig a little bit deeper because you think they're going too broad? What's a signal that you see?
Well, there's a lot of smart people and they know their stuff. They're very capable. So it isn't that. It's, I would say, Mike, they're believing in their TAM numbers.
Okay.
They're trying to execute off of TAM. Yep. Oh my God, there's 27 million small businesses in the US.
Right.
Yeah, they actually have no relation to each other. That's almost a meaningless number. And you can't execute off that because there's 72 different pockets of different personality types, industries, 72 dimensions of those kind of things. So yes, it can be big. And some, like for me, like startups are big, software is big, it's global, right? We may have already surpassed the number of startups in India as more than the US, right? People can't even see it. It's just expanding exponentially.
Yep.
But for me to say I'm just for all startups is silly, right? So, I'm for the startups outside Silicon Valley that are generally focused on practical funding. They're serious, but they're not trying to be, mega VC funding right out of the gate. So it's kind of I call it the myth of more. Right? Okay. You're going to grow faster if you expand the definition of who you could sell to. And that execution requires laser focus. And I just wrote about it yesterday on LinkedIn, the 10% rule. Yep. It's better to start in the corner with a very small subset of your big circle target market than to start with everybody. And it never works, literally. If you say there's I'm for college students. Well, there's no one kind of college student, right? And if you look at anything that succeeds, Walmart, Amazon, Microsoft, Zoom, whatever, it always starts in the corners before it gets big for everybody. Amazon, just books, just online. 10% of people buy all the books. And when they started, almost nobody was on the internet and using credit cards. So it was this very small corner, right? That they started in the corner. And then, by the way, the same number of people read books now as used to. 50% of people don't read any books every year.
I thought that was fascinating when you put that in the LinkedIn post. That resonated with me. Hey, look, you can immediately cut 50% of the market out.
Yes.
Because they're not going to read the book. They're not going to listen to a podcast like this. And even I would imagine you could take that 50% and say there are 50% only 50% who will listen, who will actually take action and start doing work.
Oh, no, that's the 10% rule. Is 10% are going to actually take action.
Okay.
If you can get a 10% response on anything, that's really high, right?
It's phenomenal, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's usually the lesson learned after some brutal execution trial, right? The savvier founders, they're like, oh no, I'm not going to boil the ocean again. I'm going to start over here and I'm going to identify the ones who have a need and I can reach and everything. That product adoption curve that we all see, that normal curve, that crossing the chasm and the early market and the early majority and all that kind of thing. Well, it's true. It's always like that. And it's literally by definition. It's not because of any kind of luck or whatever science. It's just by definition. It starts in the corners. Show me anything that starts. I'll show you it started with the person had the most extreme need and was very not normal in the beginning, who started buying that thing before normal people did. Like the person that used Zoom before, quote, everybody did it. And it's really interesting insight that it's big change starts in the corners.
I really like
Only
that.
Always.
Can you be too focused?
I think it's possible. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, so now we're being scientific. I just, after talking to thousands of entrepreneurs, had done this for 30 years and everything. It's really, we could play an example here. So this is the deal. This is an insight that I think founders could hear, which is how many people are in your target market? Millions. Okay. How many do you need to get to 3 million ARR? And usually the number is something silly like 112. Okay, so let's put that out there. Someday millions. How about we get to 112? What's the fastest way to 112? It isn't starting everyone and then sorting down from everyone. No, it's go to the place where the best 300 people most likely to buy are going to go meet. Go to that conference.
Yep.
And sell 50. Oh, right. So here's another truth. Every $1 billion revenue company that, didn't exist at some point, they had to get through 1, 5, 10, 20, $50 million. And the fastest way to grow and accelerate and do it efficiently is not be inefficient about it. You start in the corners. So that's, I call that the numbers game. At Infusionsoft, where I was chief marketing officer for 5 years, that was the epiphany. They started in the corner for internet marketers. They had a very powerful tool, and it was growing very fast. Actually, ironically, it was bootstrapped in the beginning out of a service business, and then the growth grew funding. And then they grew funding once in Series A, Series B, and then they opened it up to all small businesses. And all hell broke loose on the SaaS metrics, and it was crazy. They were selling every which way, which is a big market and go for it. But literally 10% of small businesses had the marketing knowledge, the technical ability, and the guts to go use a power tool to create a marketing engine. Yet Infusionsoft was trying to reach all small businesses in every direction, which is very efficient for small business, very inefficient. So, when you say, oh no, it's really just these guys, instead of 27 million small businesses or 50 million English speaking worldwide, how about we go to the million that understand marketing, go to conferences, have 1,000 people on their mailing list, and have outgrown MailChimp. And when we grew to 100 million in revenues from just over, just 15 million when I started, and a scrappy 15, right? We literally grew by being not for everybody, saying, no, we're just for these people. And, we just needed 30,000 customers to be a $100 million revenue business. And the fastest way to get 30,000 customers wasn't to go to the widest net and spend a lot of money and raise more money and spend it widely and inefficiently. It was to go to the million and sell 3% of them. The million most likely, shoot fish in a barrel. Yeah. So, and once that insight is, by the way, in VC funding, it's not because you get VC funding, you can just go boil the ocean again. No, you actually have to get to your efficient answer faster.
Yeah.
It's really, funding really doesn't make the growth game that much easier.
It can accelerate. It can actually accelerate really, really bad behavior and spend a lot of money doing a lot of things that distract you and take you in a different direction, because now you have to not only demonstrate, you have to demonstrate that you're doing something with the money. And sometimes you don't know necessarily what to do with the money, and you start doing with the money just because you have to do things with the money.
Yeah. So the funding can help if you know something, but you don't know something else. So you know what the experiment is, and you have enough cycle time to try a bunch of stuff and see what works, right? And you double down on what works, and you stop doing all the things that don't work. But that's where the distinction of product market fit, which Mark Andreessen came up with, it says, once you know there's something, it's amazing for somebody, they can't buy enough of it, kind of thing. Then you can add scalable, you can add salespeople, you can add marketing. Because by definition, product market fit doesn't exist for everybody. It exists in a corner. Show me a line and I'll show you there's a specialist at the end of the line, whether it's a restaurant or a band or whatever. Like I was at the ASU talking to a couple hundred engineers who were trying to be entrepreneurial, taking the entrepreneurship course. And it was really hard for them to see this. Like, it's just really hard to see. Like, how can you be big unless you're for everybody is the myth, right? That's what everybody thinks. Like, the bigger the market, faster everything is going to go. And I said, well, has anybody been to a concert where there's long lines and they did 2 shows and tickets were outrageous and it's hard to get in and all that, right? So just something with a long line of crowd. And somebody raised their hand, Metallica, 2 nights at, in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I stopped and said, all right, what percentage of the world even knows a Metallica song?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's, let's say 50%. We're starting to get in the neighborhood. There's my 50% kind of thing. What percent of people actually that would buy a ticket actually like Metallica and would consider buying? That's now we're in the 10% of the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And product market fit is a stadium full of people that say, I've heard on the radio, I bought their albums, and I'm going to drive across town, wait in line, wear my t-shirt, stand up and cheer. And it's amazing. And I'm going to tell my friends and all that kind of stuff. That's actually, which is like 1% of all the people you thought might be interested kind of thing. And even for this crowd of a couple hundred engineers, how many people would go to a Metallica concert? And it was like 10, but they filled 2 stadiums.
Right.
That is unicorn success, if you will, right? Is find the corners and be amazing for them. So does that make sense? Is that
it does. And it does. And it also reinforces something to me that I think is fascinating is how many people, whether they're founders or they're sales reps inside organizations or they're marketers inside organizations, really struggle to describe their ideal customer with a level of granularity and detail that they could pick that ideal customer out of a lineup of 10 people who have the same role, who maybe are in the same industry, but only one of those 10 is actually their ideal customer because of the background they have, the personality that they have, the thinking that they apply. We struggle with
their current beliefs about the world and what they are taking action on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's really hard. Our brains aren't wired for it. Our brains are wired for, look at the possibilities. And, entrepreneurs get inside. They could talk for 3 days, as I can and you can, about our businesses, and then the world's walking by, a ton of people walking by. And maybe 1 out of 1,000 would go, oh, I understand what you're doing. And if you gave them the 20-second summary, and even fewer would be ready to buy right now. So it's really interesting. It's just so this is a permanent condition of the human race. It isn't a function of funding and timing and technology and today's better business intelligence and all the rest of it. It's just humans. Humans want a specialist for them. They're going to only hear a short story and it says, we're best for just you, for just that thing, for just right now. That's what we do. And that's what we buy. Entrepreneurs are trying to widen the net on the other side. Think of all the people. They don't want to say no. So the difference between junior salespeople. They don't want to hear no from anybody. They don't want to say no to anything. They might cut off a deal. But the most experienced salespeople are just qualifying 90% out fast. So fast. That $150 million sale of a Phoenix software company, I was helping them with a strategy session 5 or 6 years ago in Phoenix, and the marketer was talking about the broadening of all of this. And I said, I don't know what you're saying. And there was, I don't know, I forget his name, older sales guy. He's been selling it for 15 years, seasoned sales guy, got his arms crossed in the corner. I say, so Ed, when you talk to somebody on the phone, you've been selling this for a while. How long does it take you to know if they will buy from you in the next year or not? Like awesome a qualified. Question. Yeah. What do you think his answer was?
He's been doing it for how long?
15 years.
I would say within the first 5 minutes of the conversation.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. Right? In 5 minutes, I know. Do they really have an acute problem? Do they really know it? Has somebody described this in monetary terms? Is the culture the kind of, does this person have decision-making power? You can sense that pretty quickly. And so it's really interesting that way, but especially for marketing, because, and I've heard you talk about on your podcast, the difference between sales and marketing, right? Marketing is saying repeatable, consistent things to everybody, right? Mm-hmm. It's on your website and everybody reads it just the same. And sales has a custom conversation. For you today, I'm this, and I'm not going to tell you everything, and I'm going to ask you a question first, and I'm going to respond directly to that question, and we're going to have this custom conversation.
Yep.
So marketing, shouting something very generalist in the world, very broad, doesn't get heard. In order for marketing hand-waving to work, people to get to your website and actually fill in a form and do something like that, or respond to an ad, or all of that, it has to be very focused, laser focused, literally, or people are confused by that. With sales, you can kind of come in and, you could have a whole holster full of weapons and then choose the weapon that's right for that day and say, for you today, I'm this and all of that. But that's how you get started. And sales is correct that way. But when people want to scale and they want to line up a whole bunch of them, I mean, isn't it interesting that Metallica fills stadiums, right? Yeah. With the music people are familiar with, and they play the same songs. They don't make up new songs. They could play any song of any rock and roll out there, a million songs, and they play 22 songs, the same 22 songs. Isn't it interesting, right? It's just not.
And everybody in the stadium knows what song it is based on the first note.
Right.
Or the first couple of notes.
To me, that's marketing, meaning they're going to say, if they're not saying for you today, we're going to play. Are you looking more bluesy rock or no, they line up a crowd and everybody gets the same thing, like Chick-fil-A. I also use share some of my stories here. I also use a story especially with tech founders of the chef who can make any kind of food. Okay. So what do? I do a little this, a little that, a little this, a little that. I'm super smart. I can code anything. Yes, I know you can code anything in any direction. You're like a chef who can make any kind of food, but a restaurant, which is a business, is one kind of food in one place for one audience, and it doesn't move. And they make the same thing. And if you change what they make, people stop coming back, right? Yep. So the first move in from the genius chef is to make one kind of food in one place and all of that. And the ones that scale nationally and go public and are worth billions are one thing on the menu. Like Chipotle is their organic burrito, and they could put it in a bowl and it's still a burrito magically. And it's no monopoly on the ingredients of chicken, beans, rice, and everything else, tortillas. Yet they're worth more than all the Mexican food restaurants in America combined. And they make 1% of all the things on a potential Mexican restaurant menu. Isn't that interesting?
It is amazing what happens when you simplify things and continue to create a consistent experience and you can niche down into that thing. Like I know when I go to In-N-Out Burger, I know what I'm getting. I don't go to In-N-Out Burger because I want chicken tenders or something like that. And
people used to go to McDonald's for burgers, fast burger.
Yep.
And now McDonald's does fast everything.
Yeah.
So where do we go for burgers? We go to In-N-Out or Five Guys, and you go in there and there's just burgers in the menu, and they got a long line.
And they do it. And then they have
and charge more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They charge more. They have a following. You get to a point where they start to diversify, and now people can signal, and people will get their In-N-Out t-shirt and walk around with their In-N-Out t-shirt, or they'll walk around with their In-N-Out sticker on their laptop or whatnot. Greg,
I think the best example, just on finish off that little story for everybody, because it's very descriptive and people kind of start to see I can make anything. Yeah, you can make anything. And you can go, it's okay. Go make 100 recipes for people. And the ones where people ask for it again, right? Stop making everything else and start narrowing in on that, right? So Chick-fil-A, which started as a restaurant in Atlanta called the Dwarf House, and they sold everything. It was a roadside grill. They have a pie lady and they do steaks and everything. But they started selling, chicken sandwiches out the back door to Delta shift workers. And then they went to the mall food court when that started to happen. If you're old enough, that was a big deal. And where there was the pretzel one and the chicken one and the Chinese food one and the hamburger one and the lemonade one and the pizza one. Right. The specialists started lining up. And Chick-fil-A is now the third largest fast food chain in the country next to McDonald's and Starbucks. And they just do chicken sandwiches, and their mascot's a cow saying, hey, we don't do that. There's still just Metallica plays just Metallica, Chick-fil-A. So I'm in Texas these days. And if I wanted to go get lunch, I would avoid the corner where Chick-fil-A is, because there's always a backup for just chicken sandwiches, which they sell more same-store sales than McDonald's. They're bigger than all these other fast food chains combined, other than Starbucks, just fancy coffee with your name on it, custom coffee, and McDonald's, just fast things you can get in 60 seconds. Behind every line, there's a specialist, and there's the word just. We just do this, and we are the best at it. You have to be known as the best at something important for someone specific. And if you get to 3 million ARR with your 112 happy customers, you've got a $30 million prize. That's a better way for people to think about it than how do I be big by being for everybody? It's
a comment comes to mind, or something that I've said in a number of different places, and I hear other people say it as well, but it's you can do anything. That doesn't mean you should do it. So as you listen to the story that Greg just shared, yes, inside your business, you can do so many different things and you can apply this to do so many other things. And you know what? Some people will take your work and will apply it to solve for problems that you didn't originally intend them to solve for. And you might gather some data and learn some things from it. But if you try to do so many things, all you're going to do is continue to create noise, and you're not going to be able to clarify across your team, what questions should we be asking? What information should we be gathering to validate whether or not someone is the right fit? And then beyond that, you're going to just start marketing and spreading a lot of noise, and you're kind of throwing your spaghetti up on the wall and hoping some of it sticks. And if it sticks, then now all of a sudden you did something really well. Well, what if you could predictively or create a level of predictability in the things that you know will stick based on the things that you're hearing and seeing from customers? Greg, really powerful conversation today. Thank you.
Oh, it's fun. And it's only everybody, you and me and every other serious entrepreneur that's out there doing this thing. So finding what to focus on takes some work. There's some experimenting and, some ADD running around running experiments, but eventually you got to find the thing to focus on. Makes the crowd go crazy. So
Greg, awesome conversation. I know you're working on a number of different things. And as you had said, you're really amplifying the amount of activity on LinkedIn, and you're getting into the reality that there are other doors that you can go through. There are other options that you can go through when thinking about building a business and solving really important problems out in the marketplace. And there are other options out there. How can people find out more about what you're working on? Where would you like them to connect with you? Where would you like them to follow you?
Well, writing almost every day on LinkedIn, some of these all of these gems, there's a conversation happening out there and a growing crowd, which is a lot of fun. Founders and entrepreneurs all over the world. So people can find me on LinkedIn, Greg Head, Head, and they can follow what I'm writing on LinkedIn. They go to gregslist.com to find, the story of all the software companies in 11 cities here in the US. And we keep adding more cities to that. And they can go to greghead.com as my home base there. But by the time this podcast gets out, I will be close to have launched a new adventure, right? Of all the people I'm talking to, I'm narrowing down on a corner of these practical founders that are doing serious things, and there's no central resource or community for them. So practicalfounders.com ought to be live within weeks of when this podcast's out.
Perfect. We will include links in the show notes. If you know of someone who would find this conversation valuable, get some value out of the conversation and start to see some things that they can apply in their business and start practically applying a lot of the concepts and ideas and things that we've discussed, including creating that level of clarity and focus, please share this with them and let Greg and I both know via LinkedIn. Sales is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?